Let's go live to our panel for tonight. We have Chris Marr, former assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs, and Republican strategist John Thomas. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us. John, I'll just put to you what I've just been chatting about with Andrew. Do you also think that there's been among Republicans some frustration in the way that the events of the last week have unfolded with the killing of this man in Minneapolis?
I think there's frustration from Republican elected officials that they're losing control of the narrative of what the president is attempting to do in Minnesota. If you look at it, really, you have essentially violent protesters that are clashing with law enforcement. And instead, we're focused on particular victims, and it's derailing the president's agenda that he was, by and large, elected to drive. So I know members are frustrated with that, but I would caution Democrats that when they voted to or were pushing to defund the police, it doesn't really work out well for them. So I would caution them to halt the government over accountability measures that they could get in other ways.
Chris, strong words from some Democrats, but what could they actually do to make a change over, ICE in Minneapolis on the streets, which local and state leaders don't want to see?
Yeah, I think it's clear to everyone, including more and more Republicans, that we need to reform ICE. We're not just talking about particular victims. We're talking about two people who were shot and killed by ICE agents. The point of law enforcement is to make our communities feel safe and secure. The point of ICE is to get illegal, undocumented immigrants who are criminals off of our streets. And that is no longer what we're seeing here. We're not seeing targeted raids. We're seeing recklessness and chaos by agents who are unaccountable only to President Trump. All they care about is the orders that they're getting from the White House, which has let this go on for far too long. That's why you're seeing this recklessness and chaos in the streets. And more and more people, Democrats and Republicans alike, are saying enough is enough. You're seeing Senator Cassidy saying the credibility of ICE and DHS are at stake. You're seeing people like Pete Ricketts from Nebraska saying we need to allow for protest and assemble. And you're not seeing that in Minnesota right now. So I think everybody is in agreement that something needs to change. And the way to change it is through legislation in the United States Senate right now.
And John, what do you think of this phone call that we had between President Trump and Tim Walz? We also now have the mayor, Jacob Fry, releasing a statement saying that he's spoken with President Trump by phone as well. And he said that some federal agents will begin leaving the area tomorrow. How do you think this reflects the way that President Trump's thinking about it?
Well, I actually think it's a great first step. I was actually concerned that there just wasn't much dialogue between Minnesota leadership and federal leadership. So this is a first step. And it also perhaps is a step to helping Governor Walz instruct his law enforcement in his state to actually cooperate with federal law enforcement. I think if both of those agencies are cooperating, we might be able to avoid some of these clashes. So look, we're not out of the woods yet, but the fact that these people are talking is a good first step here.
And Chris, I just want to come back to a point you mentioned right at the end there about the Senate Democrats potentially forcing a partial shutdown over ICE funding. How realistic do you think it is that that would be successful?
I think you're seeing the approval ratings for what ICE is doing in places like Minnesota and now Maine absolutely tanking. To the initial point, this should be an issue that is advantageous to Republicans. Donald Trump, in part, won on immigration enforcement, having to strengthen our borders and on immigration. And they're now losing this issue because of the actions of these out-of-control renegade ICE officials in Minnesota. And so I think that Senate Democrats go into this with the strongest possible hand. And if Republicans don't get on board, we're going to see a government shutdown because of them.
John, what do you make of what Chris has just said there? That is really interesting, this idea that the Republicans, should be doing well on the issue of immigration with voters.
Yeah, they should. Absolutely. That was a mandate that President Trump was elected to do, not just to secure the southern border, but it's to deport criminal illegal aliens. And that's precisely what they've been doing. But they've run into some challenges. First of all, lack of coordination with local law enforcement in sanctuary areas, but also just bluntly, he's lost control of the narrative. I think one thing President Trump is good at actually is monopolizing media attention and controlling narratives. So the fact that he's stepping in on this issue, that instead he was letting whether it was Stephen Miller or Kristi Noem, his cabinet secretary at DHS, control prior. I think this is President Trump's admission that he has to roll up his sleeves, recapture the narrative, and show the American public that he's pushing their agenda, and it's not out of control. In fact, there's some reforms that perhaps can be made, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater here.
Now, gentlemen, just before I let you go, I want to turn from Minneapolis, from immigration policy, to something else that's been in the news all weekend. Of course, this monster winter storm that has swept a huge part of the United States, left hundreds of thousands of households without power. Washington, D.C. doesn't seem to have been affected that badly. I trekked into the studio this morning, climbing over snowbanks to get here. And, John, we actually have a picture of you out and about in the snow in Dallas with your dog. I want to see if we can just pull that up because it's such a cutie. Let's see if we can get that up on the screen in just a second. There he is, or she. Who are we looking at here? What's her name?
Peaches, the Greater Swiss Mountain Dog. She was living her best life in the snow.
Oh, gorgeous. And Chris, how have you been, weathering this monster storm?
Yeah, I took my 2-year-old out for a few minutes yesterday, but it was still sleeting, so it wasn't terribly comfortable for either of us. So we quickly headed back inside, and we've been hunkered down ever since then.
Yeah. And, John, how are you going to be staying warm in the days ahead? Because we do know these temperatures well below freezing are expected to stick around for quite a while.
Well, I'm a prepper, so I'm totally ready for this. I've got all of the necessities, but the key is I'm staying inside, and I'm not going to try to run into some black ice to go to the grocery store or anything. So I'm going to let this thing thaw out.
All right. Wishing you best of luck with that. And thank you to both of you for joining us this evening. Chris Marr and John Thomas, very much appreciate your time. Do take care and stay warm.
Thanks.